Joe Mo. He's the host of Mock Draft Monday on the Cardinals Show. So join the live, hit like and subscribe. Enjoy the podcast tonight. Enjoy the podcast tonight.
What is up, everyone? yes, Walter, just enjoying the video and the song. It's Monday, so we are transitioning from Mock Draft Monday to sort of Draft Preview Monday. This week and next, we're going to do a couple of things a little bit different, getting ready for the draft. We've been doing mock drafts for like months now, so many mock drafts, and now it's time to kind of process everything and try to wrap our heads around what the Cardinals are doing. Ain't that the question? And to get into that question, I thought there'd be no one better than Walter Mitchell, one of my favorite people to talk Cardinals with. I've had the pleasure of being on your podcast multiple times. I've had you on the stream once before. Glad to have you back. Walter, how are you doing on this fine Monday evening?
What could be finer than Monday Night Football with the professor? Oh my God, this is great. Thanks for having me on, Joe, and ready to roll up the sleeves and get after this draft and, talk about whatever's going on with the Cardinals.
And there's a lot going on, and most of it hasn't been good these days. Real quick, let me say to a couple of folks in the chat. We got some folks coming in. We got Bidwell's drone. Nice. I like that. Nice. Good article out by Walter. I just read it and signed on YouTube, and you have him as your guest. That rules. Well, yeah, glad you got the double dip, right, Walter and Joe? Thanks for being here. We got Silver Wolf AZ. Let's go. Thanks for being here. We got Grandizer doing what he always does, holding down the chat, putting the links in there, telling everyone where to find us. We appreciate all that you do, Grandizer. And then I know we got some other folks coming in. So thank you all for being here. So today, we're going to kind of look at a lot of different things. And I thought we'd go ahead and get started, Walter, with the article that you published. You published your kind of couple different mock draft scenarios with a couple trade backs to 7, and then one where they would stay at 3. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to put up your first mock draft, and like you just tell us what your thought process was in the mock and anything you want to tell us about the article in general. So this is the first mock draft, the one with the trade back. I turn the podium over to you.
Well, I was curious to make a poll at the end of this article, posting a mock draft where we traded down to 7 with the Raiders. 7 was as far as I wanted to go because the guy that I targeted, Nolan Smith, I think the Falcons would be all over at 8. And I figured if we were unable to get Will Anderson, the next edge guy I really love is Nolan Smith. I mean, he was the number 1 prospect coming out of high school in 2019. He had 7 sacks in 8 games last year before he tore his pec, and he was looking like a surefire top 10 lock then. And I think that, when people look at his tape and look at how fast he is, he's a 4.3 guy coming off the edge. I think he could fill that Reddick role for us in a big time way if we can't get Will Anderson, and all the buzz now is Anderson going at 2. So I figured, but what I was interested in seeing is Revenge of the Birds was if I posted a trade down mock and a stay mock where we drafted Anderson, which mock would the members there prefer? And so here was my trade down mock was I had Nolan Smith going. I had the Cardinals picking up the Raiders number 70 pick. They're 100. Can you read that?
109th, and then the future 2024 first round pick.
Yeah, and getting a first round pick in return. And they'd trade up for one of the quarterbacks. I would assume CJ Stroud would be someone they would want to pounce on, or Anthony Richardson. So, and then in the second round, I've been thinking about cornerbacks there because it's a good class of corners, but the best ones there's going to be a bunch of really good ones at the beginning of the second round. And I love Emmanuel Forbes, 14 career interceptions, 6 taken to the house, played in the SEC. And what I love about him was he was good for 3 whole years. Wasn't a one-year wonder. That's my worry about Christian Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon. I love their tapes from their play last year. For me, though, as a top 10 pick, I want to see years of similar production and level of play. And so I'm a little nervous about that with them. I feel like their transition might be slower than a Forbes, who's got great technique and he runs faster than both the other guys. He's got a slight frame, though, which I think is why they push him down the draft board. But once they see him play, I mean, he had 150 tackles at Mississippi State. He's a very willing tackler, and he plays the position technique-wise really well. So I wanted him, and then Tuli Tuilopo, I thought was a great fit for the Cardinals because of his versatility inside, outside, on the edge. And then Luke Whippler, yours and Brett Coleman's guy. By the way, if you haven't seen Joe's pre-draft video with Brett Coleman, it's talk about gold standards. I mean, the two of them are on fire on that. Go find it and see it, and you'll learn everything you need to know. Whippler was a guy that they really like. I like him too in the 3rd round. And so from there, then I wanted to grab Chandler Zavala. Now, here is a guy that Joe picked out in one of his pre-draft videos. If you haven't seen that, it's really good. I love Zavala, and he's been climbing up draft boards ever since Joe touted him. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Well, I got to credit Brett Coleman for that. He's been talking about him for a while, and he had a great interview with Zavala. And thank you for the kind words about my conversation with Brett. It was so great to get to pick his brain. But yeah, Brett Coleman's been really high on Zavala, and I watching all of his conversations about him and his interview with him. That guy, he's, with like the wide zone, like I talked about in that one video, you want those athletic guards and centers who can move. Right. And often I feel like when you're going after those guys, you sacrifice strength, right? You get guys who can move, but aren't the strongest. But when you find a guy like Zavala who can move, but is also strong like that, like, to me, even if he maybe needs a little bit of refinement, that's a really nice combination. So to me, that's just a guy I really would love to see them draft for those reasons.
Yeah, and that combo of Whippler and Zavala, I thought was terrific. And and here's the thing that's so fascinating about this draft to me is that we now have Dave Shears in the building, and I mean, this guy. What he did in building that Lions offensive line is one of the most epic draft hauls I have ever seen. I mean, it's unbelievable what he did. And for example, and I think that he's probably, now we've seen they're scouting all these tackles, right? And we know they're going to take a center. And they're probably going to take a left guard. I mean, Zavala plays left guard, so I love sticking him right in that spot. But listen to this. It all started with drafting in the 1st round a center, Frank Ragnow, who is, I mean, this was in 2018. Ragnow's been a Pro Bowler since he arrived. And then, so he gets Taylor Decker for left tackle in 2016. Jonah Jackson as left guard, 3rd rounder in 2020. And then Penny Sewell, oh my God, 1st round tackle. He's playing right tackle for them in 21. They also drafted Logan Stenberg, a guard, in the 4th round. And they have, Vaitai Halapalavada from the Eagles playing guard. I probably messed up that name.
I would too, 10 times out of 10.
Just Vi is good. They got Vi at right guard. But the point is 4 homegrown guys who have they have turned that Lions program around. Without that, the Lions would probably still be in the basement of the NFC Central because, so building it up front, and I'm just fascinated. I saw a mock draft today where someone was drafting Paris Johnson to the Cardinals at 3. So I mean, and boy, oh boy, is he a great prospect. I mean, this draft is loaded with offensive line talent. And if Sears wanted to go that way, we could see it happening. But I decided I'm going to wait till the 3rd round to grab Whippler and Zavala there. But I think we probably could see Schmitz come off the board if he's there at 34. You'd take him there, right, Joe?
I would love to take him there. Though I will say, as much as I love John Michael Schmitz, there's some good centers in this draft class that I like. Also, like Whippler, and even guys a little bit later. Like Lucian Timmy, or no, am I thinking? I think that's the right guy. The guy out of Michigan. Sorry. Anyway, I'm confusing the guy from Northwestern. I always get Lucian. Anyway, the guy out of Michigan. he's really good. So I wonder if I wouldn't look at a different position, because there's some centers I can take later. Right. It is Lucian Olatimi. I had the name right, and I'm second guessing myself.
No, it is. You nailed it.
So, man, if we take John Michael Schmitz, I'm going to love it, right? I'd be super excited. But there's also a part of me that's like, think about some of the guys that are going to be on the board at 34, some that you might not want to pass up. So,
like Darnell Walker.
Yeah.
I mean, if let's say it worked out where, Will Anderson, God forbid, wound up on the Seahawks, or they'll probably take Tyree Wilson. If not, Anderson, right? Or Jalen Carter or whatever. But if you bring in Darnell Wright, you get the perfect counter. I mean, look at the job he did on Anderson in Tennessee's upset over Bama. I mean, he stonewalled him.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that Anderson just had a particularly off day, but I mean, this guy's big mammoth right tackle. He would bring a Tristan Wirfs type, presence on that side of the line that we haven't had in a while. And, we need a right tackle. I mean, I'm hoping they hang on to Josh Jones at left tackle. What about you? Are you?
And we're going to talk about the tackles a little bit, so I want to come back to this in a little bit. But when it comes to Josh Jones, I think, it sounds like he said he plays better on the left side than the right side. So we were talking about them playing in right tackle, and it just seems with Beachum and the fact that they're looking at tackles in the draft, I just don't think they're going to start him on the right side. I think Josh Jones is going to be competing for the left guard job. And if he doesn't get it, he's going to be the swing tackle / backup left tackle in case of injury. And as much as I would like to not see us lose him, I have this bad feeling that what's going to happen is he's going to play out his rookie contract. Someone is going to sign him to be a starting left tackle somewhere else. But the good part of that is I think he's going to make a bit of money. I mean, he might not be top of the market, but there's going to be a team out there that's going to look at his tape, look at what he did when he started, and they're going to say, we can sign this guy as our starting left tackle. And I think we're going to get a compensatory pick for him in the 3rd or 4th round range, which is a 3rd rounder is what we drafted him for. So there was part of me that thought, do they trade DJ Humphries and then commit to the younger Josh Jones? But we'll see. It could happen. But I think that's, I think he's going to probably end up walking. We're going to end up getting a compensatory pick. I want to get through your mocks real quick, and then we'll come back to some of the players that we like real quick. So you mentioned you had Zavala, Jamie Robinson.
Quickly, Jamie Robinson, I like as a versatile safety. The Cardinals have shown interest in him. I was picking players that I know they've had interest in. Kobe Turner, big defensive tackle, I think would be really good value there. And then Anthony Johnson is also a safety, versatile safety. I probably piled on too much, but I wanted to get an A plus.
Right.
He was like, like way by far the most ranked guy on the board. So
yeah.
And then Jonah Tavai, Cameron Thomas's teammate with the Aztecs, is a little undersized, but this guy packs punch, and I thought he'd be good value there. And then Darian Thompson Robinson, the Cardinals worked him out, so I figured, he'd be a good pickup at the end of that draft. And this was the draft that the majority of the ROTB voters voted for.
Oh, they preferred this one. Okay.
Stay-in, yeah. In the stay-in, I just had, of course, Will Anderson up front, a guy that you and I both really like a lot, Keanu Benton. This is not a deep defensive tackle class and doesn't have many pass rushers from the interior. Benton's really come on as a pass rusher. He's always been good against the run. PFF gave me a C- there. Well, that's so wrong. But
they have him ranked too low.
Yeah. And then Whippler was a constant. Garrett Williams, who the Cardinals really like, and he's coming off an injury, but he's very much a Gannon-esque defensive back. He can play zone really well. He's crafty, and he also is big physical man, cover corner. Tanner McKee, I took at this spot. I thought beginning of the fourth round, he was still on the board. Big, strong thrower of the football. I like him a lot. I think he's underrated in this draft. I put him on a par right up there with some of the top guys. So I thought that would be good value. Corey Trice, I just started looking into, and I love his game. He reminds me of Shaquille Griffin. His physical corner, plays the left corner position, which we need. So I had him in there. Hunter Lepke, I want to bring back the fullback. And this kid's a baller and a half. Don't let the grade fool you. This kid will be an instant star on special teams. And he's so versatile, and he's good out of the backfield and receiving too. So he's like a triple threat, utility player and situational player. And I want to bring back the romance of the ISO block.
Right.
I don't know why we never ran that with Kingsbury, because it's the best block in football. I hated to see middle linebackers against us have field days, and we don't put a single ISO block on them. I don't know why, but that's hopefully going to change. And then I love this Bryce Barringer, big time leg from Michigan State. There are a handful of really good punters, and I think the Cardinals, because they haven't re-signed Annie Lee, would more than likely they're probably planning to take a punter at some point.
Gotcha. Well, obviously, love Keanu Benton. With the interior defensive line you talked about, like there's some nice players, but like there's not as much depth as there is at cornerback or edge, and obviously, and the best player at the position, there's the question marks about the off the field stuff. So, I just suspect he's off the Cardinals board. They haven't met with him from what I've heard. I figured if they were going to be drafting him, they'd have met with him. Maybe they're keeping it quiet. I don't know. But, you look at Keanu Benton and Mazi Smith, to me, are the next two guys there. Right. And if you don't get one of those, there's some other players in this draft that aren't bad. But there's a drop off there, and they're both. I think a lot of people think they're both going to go somewhere late first, early second round. So pick 30. That's why, as much as I love John Michael Schmitz, might have to pass on him if you want to get one of those interior defensive linemen. Williams is a nice option at in the third round in a deep cornerback class. Lipke, that's an interesting go in the fullback, and this offense is the same that they're probably going to run is similar to the same school of thought as the Shanahan offense. So, that it could make sense, right, to have a fullback there. Because we've seen what they've done with Juszczyk. Let me say hey to some of the other folks in the chat, get a couple comments, and then we'll talk about some of the things. PL, I finally made it live. Thanks for being here. We got Chris Smith. Let's go, Bird Gang. Appreciate you, Chris. We have gaming videos from Aspie. Thanks for being here. I didn't know Walter did a podcast. I'll have to check it out. So much content online. Yep, the Red Rain podcast. So does some really good stuff. They're talking all things Cardinals. And then we've got my friend Kevin from the Reset Musical. The Professor, love that nickname, Walter. Yeah, thank you. I was hanging out. Kevin's a good friend of mine from Texas. We were hanging out a couple weeks ago at a conference. So it's good to see you in here. Thanks for being here. Grandizer, Josh Jones was a steal in 2020. He was projected a low first to second round pick, a steal in the third. Love that pick. Yeah, he was like really highly graded in pass blocking coming out of Houston. Some people thought he'd be a first rounder, slid to us. So yeah, and sad to see that it doesn't seem like he's going to be a starter here long term, but yeah. Pete Treepeck saying, yes, Josh Jones was a good pick. Now we need to find a place to play him. Left guard, that seems like the most likely place, right? Otis Driftwood, Yoda, what's poppin'? Appreciate you being here. Chris Young, howdy folks. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Hey, Chris.
Silver Wolf agrees with you. Bring back the fullback position, right? He is on board.
Of course, he's Wolf.
Yes. And then let's see. Chris Young saying, I like Lipke as a player. I think it's just a question of if it's a scheme they want to run. I do think he does. I think a fullback, if it's the right kind of fullback, kind of that versatile fullback does, right? What are your thoughts on the fit in terms of the, comparing it to what we've seen with the Shanahan offense?
Well, we know what Justin Juszczyk does for the 49ers. I mean, the dude's a Pro Bowler, and he's so versatile. I would like to sign us up for a guy like that. I mean, the last fullback we had, Anthony Sherman, was from right in my backyard here in North Attleboro. I watched him play as a high schooler. And loved him, went to Connecticut, excelled there. He was a great special teams player for us and a really good fullback. He ended up making the Pro Bowl as a fullback for the Chiefs. I just hated that move when they traded him away. And I thought he was a great value pick in the 5th round when they traded him. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because, if you look at the Cleveland Browns offense, they use a fullback from time to time to spring those twin running backs that are so good. I mean, I think having the big running game to take the pressure off the quarterback is a huge would be a huge upgrade for the Cardinals, and I think something to really focus in on. And I think that Monty Ossenfort and Dave Sears are very focused in on doing that. I have a strong feeling they are. It wouldn't surprise me either. I mean, I know I saw Jahmyr Gibbs being mocked to us in the 2nd round. I wouldn't be surprised if we spring on a running back somewhere along the line here. I love Tyjae Spears of Tulane. I think he would be dynamic in that offense. But there's some good ones. Tank, Bigsby, they just brought in. He'd be a really good fit. But ball control, getting that zone blocking scheme, which you've outlined so well, Joe, in your threads, that's exciting to me. Maybe we'll actually run the ball well.
That would be nice. Let me get a couple other comments real quick, and then we'll talk about a couple other things here. But let's see. AP heard Mazzie Smith could go Pittsburgh first round. I saw that in a mock. Yeah. I think Mazzie is a late first, early second. He's kind of one of those players that's on that verge where it's hard to tell. But I could absolutely see him late first round. We'll see, right? Chris Smith, At this point, I think the best situation for the Cardinals is if the Texans take Anderson, we get to take a team to the cleaners. That's been in the conversation. We'll talk about that in a minute. Diego Vanucci saying, what about Tippmann as a center option? He's physical, fast, and strong. Tippmann's a nice option. I mean, people have said he's the best pulling center in this draft. He moves like a tight end as an offensive lineman. So he'd be a great option. In my video, I shied away from him because he's so tall, and I try, all things being equal, I went with shorter offensive linemen, just to kind of help Kyler out. But that doesn't mean the Cardinals are going to necessarily avoid those taller prospects. So no, he'd be a great option. Some people think he might go. There's some people think he'll be the first center off the board, depending on how it plays out.
Yeah.
Brett Jones, running late. How about Adetimo Adebawore? Could be a great 3-tech and more on the D-line. That guy, his testing numbers were out of this world for his size, like 99th percentile. So he'd be an interesting day 2 prospect to get on the interior defensive line. Would love to see that.
Wide receiver. And we have the Northwestern connection.
Right.
Ryan Smith.
I'm sorry, with who?
Ryan Smith, the new DB coach.
Oh, okay.
Comes from Northwestern. So not only could we see him, we could also see Cameron Mitchell late in the draft, who's a really nice corner that's kind of flying under the radar.
Yeah. Well, Aaron Van Buren, who's often on here with me or has been in the past, did some internship at Northwestern and is really pulling for the Northwestern players. Brett also says wide receiver Charlie Jones from Purdue does drop the ball. He's a guy that a lot of people are talking about, though. He's good special teams return man. He's a guy who's kind of seems like he's an early day 3 kind of prospect, 4th, 5th down, but could climb the boards. They had a meeting with him, and we'll get to those early in a bit. Class Nasty looks good to me. He likes your mocks. Brett Jones also saying Stromberg.
Stromberg.
Brett Coleman loves Ricky Stromberg out of Arkansas. Just talking about how he just beat up all the defensive linemen he played against. So I want to talk about a couple of different things. So when we look at the first round, you did the 2 mocks, right? One with a trade, one without, and you picked the 7th pick overall as far as the trade partner, because that's kind of where you wanted to go. Putting your prognosticator cap on, and not necessarily going by what Walter or Joseph would prefer, but trying to give your best guess of what the Cardinals are actually going to do. What do you think is going to happen with pick number 3?
Trade.
Okay. And how far back?
I could see them, just getting whatever the best haul is.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many good offensive linemen in a trade back. I mean, if Sears took Ragnow, I believe at 15 in the draft that he came out.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they traded beyond 15, Joe, it wouldn't shock me at all if they took Schmitz.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If they went beyond 15, or they just wrapped up, or one of those great tackles is still. I mean, Paris Johnson's still there. So they have him in a heartbeat. And you have that row of tackles. I mean, Darnell Wright, I think he's a first rounder. I watched his tape. I love the guy. He's physical. He's got great punch at the line of scrimmage. We missed out on Tristan Wirfs. I mean, if we landed Darnell Walker, wow, that would be a coup. But some of these tackles and offensive linemen are I think, underrated too.
Mm-hmm.
To where, I mean, Tippmann, great. Whoever recommended Tippmann, he is an outstanding prospect. And in fact, Lindy's comps him to Ethan Palchik, who was a center we were hoping the Cardinals would sign in free agency, because he's coming off a great year in Cleveland last year. And Drew Petzing, of course, knows him really well. But he's got the length, but also the feet, and that's a rare combination.
Yeah. You make a good point. And so let me say, like, when it comes to the trade back, and I want to talk about the tackles a bit more too, like in my conversations with Brett Coleman, both on air and off air, he's talked about, listen, and he said it in the live stream, Cardinals fans, be patient. You might be waiting a while. Like, the popular picks have been the most, obviously a lot of people love trading back to number 4 because in theory you'd still get Will Anderson, although recent developments have certainly shooken that possibility. But that was the idea. Oh, trade back to 4, Indy trades up, gets the quarterback they really want. And then we still get Will Anderson. Everybody wins. That seems less likely. Pick 7, the Las Vegas Raiders seems like a team that's interesting to look at. Even though they signed Jimmy Garoppolo, he's still more of a bridge quarterback, I think, for them, especially with his health. I'm surprised Atlanta's not more in on quarterback because Arthur Smith is going into his 3rd year. He doesn't have a legit quarterback that they know is the guy. I know like Desmond Ridder, they like some things about him, but people aren't really talking about him. Pick 11 is become very popular, right? Tennessee, Austin Fort's old team. And I think a lot of people like that trade back option because they also compare it to the 49ers trade for Trey Lance and hope and assume we'll get 3 first-rounders out of it.
I don't see that.
Yeah, and I will say, like, that trade was considered an overpay at the time, even with the quarterback tax that people add. So I think a trade back to 11 is more likely to be, we'll get 11 this year, a 3rd rounder this year, a 1st rounder next year, and like a 2nd rounder in 2025 or a 3rd rounder next year.
Yeah.
But like, I think there's a very good chance. I mean, for many fans, 11 is the backstop, how far they want to go back. But I would not be shocked if they go further back. Washington at 16, even other teams further back going all in. Monty comes from New England where they like 2nd round picks and later 1st round picks. And, or if they trade back twice, what if they trade back to 4 and then trade back again to get, so I think there's a good chance. And you mentioned tackles, and I want to kind of bring something up because this is a list of the tackles that the Cardinals have met with, at least based on the reports I've been able to find. So there's some websites that mention meetings that coach or teams have had at pro days and the combine, those top 30 visits and Shrine Bowl and stuff like that. So accumulated whatever reports I could find of players the Cardinals have met with, and added a few players on the list are players that aren't on those lists, aren't reported elsewhere. But if you look at like Flight Plan, like Matt Bergeron, Luke Whippler, a few other players you can eyeball, like, oh, they left a meeting with the Cardinals, right? There's a shot of them exiting the meeting room at the combine. And I want to point this out. Like, when you look at the tackles, there's some guys that are like day 3 tackles, right? McClendon Curtis, Braden Daniels, who might be more of a guard. Carter Warren, who's maybe a day 2, day 3 kind of a guy. I really like him. But what stands out to me is if you look at this, these tackles here are all tackles that you look at, you're like, they're not taking any of these guys at pick 3. Or I know there's a mock draft that had that, but if they do, that just seems really a reach. So these all look like trade backs. But like, really, most of them are trade backs much further than pick 7. Peter Skoronski is a guy, a lot of people have PFF and ESPN. Those are their rankings. They both have him ranked at 8. Roderick Jones, ESPN has him ranked at 13. But like most of these guys, and, tackles get a little bit overdrafted, so they might get drafted higher than their ranking. So, guys that draft ranked at 25 might get picked at 18 kind of a thing.
Right.
But the point is, these look like players that they've met with these guys because I think there's a chance they could draft them. And those are players that look like trade backs pretty far.
Great.
A lot of those guys aren't guys you'd expect to follow. Now, these players here are players I think you could argue they've met with because they're hoping that by some stroke of good luck, they fall to pick 34. I think most people, at this point, believe Darnell Wright will go in the 1st round, but there have been some who thought he'd go early 2nd. Harrison maybe slides, maybe doesn't. Bergeron's likely to be there in 2nd, although he could go late 1st. So just looking at the players they've met with on tackle, it just feels like they're either planning to I should say planning, but they are anticipating a high probability that they end up in the mid to late first round, whether that's a trade back or a trade back up. But it seems like a trade back or a couple of trade backs are more like, I don't know, maybe Detroit, they somehow get those 2 first round picks out of a trade up from them and get that 18th pick. So anyway,
here's a scenario for you. Vikings. 23. Okay. The Vikings might offer the biggest haul the Cardinals are going to get. If they have a chance of getting 3 first rounders or 2 first rounders and a second, it would probably come from the Vikings because they really they want to pull a Patrick Mahomes out of the hat in this draft, like the Chiefs did, when they had Smith at quarterback and then they jumped up there and grabbed Mahomes. And then had Mahomes play behind Alex Smith for a year. That's what they ideally want to do. They want to grab one of these quarterbacks. I mean, if Stroud is there at 3, I bet the Vikings are on the phone, and offering a big time package, which may include a player or two too, because you have Gannon's knowledge of the Vikings. And guys that, he's coached before, there could be players involved as well. So, and then moving down to 23, we got, like you just highlighted, one of those tackles or 2 of them are going to be there if you're going to go tackle. But then that gets you in the range of where it wouldn't be out of the question to take Schmitz and get that done, if they wanted to take him there. And you also probably have at that spot some of those edge rushers, BJ Ojolari. I mean, some of the ones might sneak up on people. The kid from Kansas State. I mean, there are other edge rushers. They probably could get at 34 too, and some of the corners like Emmanuel Forbes. I mean, so they're going to be good players in that area of the draft that are probably like the guy I think that might fall a little bit is Skoronski. The reason why is that everyone's so projecting him for going into guard because he's got short arms.
Right.
So I mean, the fact that he's rated that high is kind of, I think, misleading, because if he doesn't project as a left tackle, do you take a guy who's you're going to convert to guard in a top 10? I don't see it. He's a baller and everything. I mean, and he'd have the Bears connection, because of Northwestern and everything. But I don't think the Bears are going to take Skoronski there. I just have a feeling they've got other plans. But I mean, I think he could be a surprise guy down in the 20s. And a lot of those guys can, because of the depth you just showed too, Joe. A lot of teams might be thinking, well, we'll get a tackle, a good one in round 2. So let's address another position. So I like the fact that the Cardinals have done their due diligence and have interviewed all these guys. And just one other thing that really kind of pisses me off is, who had the highest offensive grade on the entire team last year?
Highest offensive grade on the entire team. I want to say Kelvin Beachum. It's actually, he graded reasonably well.
8th or 9th.
Okay, wow.
Highest graded player on the Cardinals last year, and he played 9 starts, was Josh Jones.
Okay. Yeah, he graded really well.
High 70s grade. Like 78.8.
Interesting.
Right? Now, it's so classic Cardinals. You got a guy grading that high and proved himself, and yet you're not going to play him there this year, or you're not planning to play him there. For DJ's on the verge of leaving. Do you agree?
DJ Humphries, I don't know. I mean, I thought he would be a guy that they would consider, moving on from, just with the change of regime and being a little bit older.
Right.
but it doesn't seem like that's happening. So I don't know.
Well, it could, if they drafted a Paris Johnson, they're not putting Paris Johnson at guard.
Yeah.
I mean, if they are, it's just plain stupidity.
Yeah.
It's doing the same bullshit over and over.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna take one of these really good left tackles in the first round, he better be starting from day one.
And I was gonna say, like, that's one thing for me. Like, I'm not excited about the idea of taking a tackle in the first round. That's not like I'm not gonna say we have the best tackles in the world, but we have like, and I know you've got to look for talent for the future, but like there are other needs that are so much bigger and so much more immediate. And you've got 2 starting left tackles. You pick one, commit to him, draft a right tackle in round 4 or 5 because you can get a starting right tackle on day 3. And do something else in the first round. That's my take.
I agree.
So I want to, you mentioned a couple things I want to kind of speak to, and then I want to get to some of the comments in the chat. There's some questions and stuff. I always want to make sure we get to you good folks that are hanging out with us. Vikings. You mentioned Vikings. I will tell you, you're not the first person I've heard that from. Like, what if the Vikings go all in on trading up? Right. Someone else mentioned that to me at one point, someone, who I had a conversation with who follows this stuff. So that's not out of the realm of possibility. Right. And, Chris saying, I have no problem going as far back as they want, so long as they're getting an appropriate amount of compensation. If you go back to, what are they, 26 or whatever they're at, Vikings, you go that far back, you're getting probably 3 first-round picks plus another maybe day 2 pick, or a couple more day 2, but you're getting a nice haul to build this roster. And that wouldn't shock me. Now you mentioned the idea, well, do they go everyone's favorite, John Michael Schmitz, in the if they trade back in the first round? And I'm going to tell you, I don't think they do. Watch them prove me wrong. And I'm going to point back, that chart I did looking at the draft picks that were made in the front offices where Monty Austin Fort worked, right? When he was the pro scouting with Patriots and Titans. I did the video based on this, and obviously he's not beholden to this in any way. However, it's not unreasonable to think that being steeped in those front office cultures, their philosophies will be a foundational part of what he does.
Right.
And the thing that stands out to me is at no point did either of those teams draft an interior offensive lineman before the 3rd round. In fact, only 1 3rd rounder, mostly 4th round. Now, I could see him going away from that, but I think going away from that is more like late 2nd round. If through a trade they end up with the late second round pick, I could see them going Whippler or Tippmann. I think Schmitz isn't gone by then, but if he's still there, I just don't think they're going. I don't think they're going center in the first round, even with the trade back. And I don't think they're going center at 34. I think Monty Austin Fort believes he can find a starting center in rounds 3 or 4, even if it isn't Whippler, even if it isn't Tippmann, even if it isn't Schmitz. Maybe it's Ricky Stromberg, maybe it's Juice Struggs, maybe it's someone else he has scouted that we haven't talked about, because they found those guys in New England. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. So I love John. You know how much we love John Michael Schmitz. So Grant Nizer, question: if John Michael Schmitz is at number 3 overall, do you run to the podium? It's a legit question. No, but boy, do I love John Michael Schmitz, right? Let me real quick get to some comments from the chat, and then we'll get back to you, Walter. We've got Brett Jones saying defensive line Carl Brooks, All-American, was invited to the Senior Bowl. Another guy on day 2, 3. Love that.
Love him.
I'm really a fan of those really athletic tweener, kind of the bigger tweeners, not the little tweeners like the outside linebacker, small tweeners, but like he's like 300 pounds, but listed as an edge, because with their multiple fronts, those guys who are big, but also very athletic, I'm intrigued by how they fit there. So that's a guy I like. Diego she's saying, do you think Ryan Kelly is a good value in a haul with the Colts? That trade was floated out there.
No.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Eh.
He's a fine player. I want to draft a center. I don't want to trade for one again, even if it's a proven center. You're already, that rookie contract is very valuable. Having a good player on that rookie contract,
Right.
And interior offensive line is one of those positions that you don't want to pay more than you need to early on. So I'm with you on that. Thoughts on Olatimi? I like him a lot as a guy that they might get in maybe round 3 or 4. What are your thoughts on Olatimi?
Love him.
Yeah.
Little undersized, but quick, smart, baller, good leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can get him definitely in the 4th round, but possibly even in the 5th. I mean, if they add another pick in there, we have the long drought between pick 105 and then the end of the 5th round. So if they, in some of those trades, you get a pick in there, Olatimi would fit in perfectly in there, and Stromberg. There's in Scruggs. I mean, those guys are good players. I mean, this is a good draft to be wanting to draft a center.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you broke that down perfectly, Joe. I think I totally agree with you. I don't think we see a center until day 3. Or maybe if Whippler's around at 96, I could see them making a play for him there. And if the other guys that, if he's on top of their board. But the other wild card here is Hjalte Froholt, who, from what I've heard, the coaches really like. So, I mean, I don't. Should they give him a shot and then develop a center behind? And you got Lacita Smith behind, who I think has potential. I mean,
sure.
You don't like Lacita?
Lacita. So okay, with Froholt, my whole take on him was, and this is something I've said before, he was exactly the kind of free agent center you sign if you're planning to draft someone, but you want someone who can start in case you don't land the center in the draft that you wanted, or you do draft a center and he's not ready to start. Froholt is, I think, a low-end capable starter in terms of what I've seen from his grades and everything. I think he's a guy you can start. He fits the scheme, right? He's tall, moves, well. I don't think he's a long-term answer, but I think he's much better than Billy Price was for us. I think if he had to start for us, I would not be worried like I would with Billy Price, but I would still prefer a draft pick. So that's kind of my take on him. Lacita Smith, listen, he played, he admirably under a really difficult circumstance with so many injuries. I mean, offensive line, when you have such a decimated line, that's such a connective group, right? That when you have all those injuries, it's hard for even a good player to not struggle. So the fact that he held his own in a couple games, I think he's got some interesting potential. They liked Marquise Hayes before he got injured. So it's going to, I think that at left guard, as much as I'd love to get Chandler Zaval, and you mentioned you think they're going to go with the left guard, I actually think what's going to happen is they're going to take a center. I think they're going to get a tackle somewhere, whether it's early or late. There's guys like Carter Warren that I like later that I'd rather have them go in like the 4th round or whatever.
Right.
And then I think what's going to happen is left tackle, they're set with 2 potential starters. They're going to have a guy they drafted at center. Either him or Froholt are going to start. Obviously, Will Hernandez at right guard, although he could play left guard. Right tackle, Kelvin Beachum. And I think they're going to go Hunger Games at left guard, see who survives. Between they signed the guy that Elijah Wilkinson from Atlanta, who's guy can play tackle or guard. Right. They've got the 2 rookies from last year. Froholt, if he doesn't start at center, can also play guard. I think they're gonna, and Josh Jones. I think they're gonna let those 4 or 5 players all duke it out and see who emerges as the starter at left guard.
That's a little scary to me
Yeah.
because of a guy named Aaron Donald.
That's how a lot of offensive lines do it, though. They have most offensive lines have one position that they approach that way, right? And it's usually a guard.
I think if they could get Osiris Torrance, he could take the romance out of Aaron Donald's pass rush. If you get a thick guy like him in there, and he's got feet too, Joe. I mean, that kid can play. I mean, wow. I mean, and he has the physical strength he didn't give up a sack in like 2 years, right? I mean, this is a guy who can't even maneuver around. I mean, he's an unusually talented prospect coming out of UCLA. So, but anyway, to get back to your point, it wouldn't surprise me at all if you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And the Elijah Wilkerson deal may have sealed that. And he's a capable player. I don't know if he can match up. Not too many guys can match up against Aaron Donald, obviously.
No.
And, and now we've also got Hargrave in the division, Javon Hargrave. Frick it all.
Yeah.
I mean, so we got to, but it gives me confidence to know that Dave Sears is doing his thing. And, it wouldn't surprise me if there's some offensive line surprises throughout the draft. But, I think you're right. I think that they've done a lot of the work beforehand to be able to maneuver this draft so that they don't feel they have to take a center at any certain spot or, or a tackle. And I like your strategy.
I suspect that's what's going to happen. We'll see, right? It's going to be interesting to watch that for sure. Couple other comments. See, someone mentioned that they like Mizaki Felix likes the Wanya Morse, right? Tackle at OU. A lot of people have been talking about him. At least I've heard some people as an interesting guy, day 2 or 3. So he's a guy that if you can get a little bit later, that could be that right tackle for you potentially, right? So yeah, for sure. Robert Moore, thanks for being here. Robert brings up, and I think this is a good segue to talk about something. With the potential loss of Buddha, does that change your draft strategy for the 2023 draft? And you kind of mentioned before we went live that you've got some thoughts on Buddha that you're actually going to be working on an article on that, I believe. Yeah. So I'd be curious to hear, what are your thoughts about what's going on with Buddha? Obviously that's been the big news lately. And then, what your thoughts are in terms of draft strategy regarding that.
Let me jump on the latter question first. Is that one of my top 5 favorite players in this draft is Brian Branch of Alabama. Not only is he the stickiest cover, slot corner cover in the draft, he's probably the best tackler in the draft. I mean, of 176 tackle chances at Alabama in 3 years, he made 172 tackles. That is absolutely fun. He missed 4 tackles in 3 years. That is absolutely. I'm playing a sort of hybrid slot safety outside linebacker position, which is made to order for JG's defense, by the way.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the Cardinals would have the cojones to trade back and take Branch. Although if they did, I think it would be a brilliant move, because this guy, I mean, in today's football, if you can't cover the slot, you can't win. And that's why the Cardinals have been lousy on defenses. They can't cover the slot. I mean, how often do we have to see Tyler Lockett go off on us? How often do we have to see Cooper Kupp? I mean, if you don't have a guy who can dog those guys, and Deebo Samuel and now Christian McCaffrey, I mean, you got to have a dog in there who can pester these guys. And so, I mean, if they pick Branch, it would tell me something like that's something Lou Anarumo would have done. he would take Branch because he's cracked the code once he got Mike Hilton to play the slot. And not only is Hilton great dog in the slot, he's really good at tackles for loss. I mean, the dude's a tackler, he's a baller. This is what Branch is, only even better. He's a better prospect than Mike Hilton. So, but here's my theory of what's going on with Buddha. I think that the Cardinals have looked at the Isaiah Simmons situation and figured we don't want to repeat error of not picking up a talented player's fifth-year option. Isaiah yesterday tweeted out he felt blessed. I think some of us sort of inferred maybe he's been told he's going to be the strong safety this year, which is the position he's made to order. Also, in Gannon's defenses, he interchanges the safeties. If you notice what he did with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson last year, and this is going to be Isaiah is going to be Gannon's version of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in AZ. I mean, so, and I think he's going to make Isaiah Simmons a star. And I think he knows it now, and they're going to pick up that option because, with the Reddick situation, how ironic it was. They didn't pick up the option, and they screwed around, and then they chose Chandler Jones over him, who was on the tail end of his deal. And then now we don't have either one of them. And we don't have a suitable, someone really dynamic to take his place yet. So that's why we need Will Anderson. That's why if we can't get Anderson, maybe Nolan Smith or one of these pass rushers. But the tremendous irony is that Gannon was the lucky recipient last year of Reddick. And the guy that drafted Ossenfort drafted Chandler Jones. And was one of the personnel guys who saw them trade Jones to the Cardinals. We're on the opposite ends of that exchange. And I just think that they're really high on Isaiah. And that makes Buddha, a talking point for trades because the other dynamic in that is Jalen Thompson, what they gave him in a contract. I don't think they're going to get value for him because he's not coming off that great a year. Buddha, on the other hand, if he was trying to sell away out of Arizona, go back and watch Hard Knocks. Who wouldn't want Buddha Baker on their team? Not only just as an alpha dog who plays with his heart and gives his heart, but what he does on the field, how he came back from that high ankle sprain and didn't even miss a game, how he even continued to play with a broken shoulder. This guy just hauled it all out on the field, left it all out there, and that's what he does. And let's not forget, the last time we saw him play the year before, he was being carted off in an ambulance to a Los Angeles hospital. And, a lot of guys with a concussion like that wouldn't come back and be ready the way he was.
Yeah.
He went to OTAs because he said he owed it as a captain to the players. He said he wanted to be there for the younger guys. Buddha Baker has done everything humanly possible to do it the right way. He cut his teeth on special teams. Some guys feel they're too good. Second rounder, I don't want to play second. He said, no, let me at it. And made the Pro Bowl and all pro, first team, special teamer as a rookie. That's how much pride he takes in whatever he does. And it's just so heartbreaking to think that he's going to be gone. But this is a football decision. That they've got to figure something out with Isaiah. And, Joe, I thought maybe they might put Isaiah on the edge in Reddick's spot. But now the more I think of it, I think Isaiah's made to order for that safety spot. He can cover the tight ends. Plus, you get to get him on the back end in zones where he's so, dynamic as a free safety. Covering deep, which is not Jalen Thompson's or Buddha Baker's forte. In zone situations, having Isaiah on the back end. Yeah. Unbelievable. So, what do you think of that?
I do see it differently. Let me start with the first part with the trade, how it affects the draft. I think that I love Brian Branch, I just don't like going with him in the first round for the Cardinals because of the other needs.
Yeah.
Love him as a player. To me, he's the kind of player that like, and I don't know that they'll take him because I don't know if it's need for them, but he's the kind of player that slides and the Ravens take and everyone's like, wow, what a great pick, right? That's the kind of thing.
Right?
But I don't think I think for what the Cardinals need, I think they should go in a different direction. I think someone like Jamie Robinson that we talked about before is in play maybe in round 3 if they trade Buddha. Because he's a guy he's not maybe at the same level as Branch, but I don't think he's that far off as a player. So I think that the value they'd go that direction. As far as the whole thing, where I look at it, where I see it differently is it sounds like you're kind of saying this is more of an intentional affirmative effort to shop Buddha because they want to move Simmons and play him at safety and get something out of. I don't think I think this was what has been reported. Buddha wanted a raise and extension. Monty Ossenfort said, in whatever way he said it, or decided, we're not going to do that right now. And he really doesn't want to, Buddha's going to be 29. I think he deserves it. I think he's going to, I agree with you in what Buddha means. I had a whole live stream where I was like, hey, I don't care what the numbers tell you. I love analytics, but in this one case, throw those out the window. I think you pay him for, and keep him. But I think Monty is looking at it, and other people have talked about this and reported this. A couple of people have said they think he's looking at this saying, I can't just every time a star player comes and wants more money with 2 years left of their contract. If I start saying yes, I have to say yes every time. He's trying to avoid setting a precedent, and I think that's so. I think that's pretty much what it is. And I think, all the reporting sounds like they have no intentions of trading him. In fact, I think the more likely result is going to be a Chandler Jones type situation. I hate to say it that's what it's going to be, but I think unless he holds out and refuses to play, I think they're going to just not address it. They're going to want him to play out his contract. And if he does continue to show up and play, and I think there's a good chance he does, because I don't know that he's going to hold out. I think he's a guy who's stated his case, but he's going to come to work. And then when his contract is up, he's going to go somewhere else. And even if they offer him money, I think he's going to go somewhere else. And we're going to end up with a compensatory pick. And they're at that point going to have a different safety, and they're going to move on. I don't like that, but I also don't think although I think they should give him the money and keep him because of all the things you said that he means. At the same time, I don't think it dooms our roster by not extending him. I think if they draft well from an objective roster perspective, they can build a good roster, letting him walk in 2 years. So that's my thinking. But man, we're reading the tea leaves at this point, right?
Right. But then if you look at 2024, if you pick up Isaiah's 5th year, that's $12.4 million.
Yeah.
Buddha's salary in 2024 is 14 point something.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the base, and then you have Thompson. We could do a look up on him. He got signed for pretty good quan.
I'll look at his contract.
So you got 3 safeties paying in excess of $30 million. And I think if you look at that down the road, in a year's time, something's got to give, because I don't see them devoting over $30 million to the safety position.
Well, this is another interesting point, because when I talked to Brett Coleman, he didn't think that Simmons was going to be safety. He actually thought in this defense, he was going to be the strong side Sam linebacker.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought for a while there.
Well, that's what Brett thinks he's going to do.
Right. What do you think of that?
It's interesting because, this is a different defense than what we've seen with Vance Joseph, right? It's a more of a hybrid that's going to be a 4-3/nickel. And, and one thing, what Brett was saying when he talked about that was that Sam linebacker drops into coverage some, but rushes the passer some, but also does kind of some off-ball linebacker duties. It's kind of a little bit of all those things. And he graded well in pass rushing, right? But he's not a full-time edge in that role with this kind of defense, because when they go to the nickel, that's when you have your guys like, Cam Thomas or whatever on the edge, and he's playing more off ball. So I wonder if in that role, if they commit to him at the Sam linebacker, he could thrive, because part of his issue is they've tried to use him as a chess piece all over the board, and it felt like he couldn't settle in. Right. Maybe if they settle him into Sam linebacker, where there's still some variation in what he does, so they capitalize on what he does well.
Right.
But he's getting to have a home, and it is a position that isn't a redundancy like safety. I could see that, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, the thing about the Reddick role, and this is the role we're talking about. Reddick
kind of, yeah. I guess Reddick played that role for them in Philly, right? So yeah.
And what Gannon did with Reddick was he rushed him 566 times and dropped him into coverage 66 times.
Well, I would say I don't know if he's going to be in the Reddick role. I think he's.
Well, White isn't as strong. He's a weak.
Yeah.
So, unless they get a middle linebacker and move Zaven over. So this is why Will Anderson would be a great fit in the Reddick role. So would Nolan Smith, I believe, with his athleticism. Someone fast like that, rushing consistently. That's what Jonathan Gannon loves. He loves someone storming that front side of the quarterback edge to create pressure on almost, like 566 to 66 is like, 6 out of 7 times he's sending that edge.
Yeah.
So, and defending the run along the way. So can Myjai Sanders play that role? I think he might be able to, but I'm not sure that he's quite as.
I think Myjai is going to be more the guy that they have rushing the passer.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, and could Reddick play that role? Gardick.
I think Gardick is going to be reverted more to special teams and maybe some rotational pass rush. We'll see. Yeah. And real quick, Keenan Oaken's asking, what about Myjai and Cam? Don't they play? So real quick, my understanding of the defense, and Walsh, you can maybe add anything that you would want to add. Like, okay, so under Vance Joseph, it was a 3-4 base, three interior defensive linemen, 4 linebackers, but the 2 outside linebackers, and those are actually edge rushers, inside linebackers, or more off-ball linebackers in a 3-4. But they played a lot in the nickel, which was more like a 4-2-5, where when they went to the nickel in that defense, those outside linebackers went to defensive end. Then they played 2 interior linemen, and then still kept 2 linebackers, just 2 off-ball linebackers, a safety and some or a slot corner and safeties. The defense from that we think they're going to bring is more of a 4-3,
right?
Than with nickel. So when they're in that 4-3, although they're going to do multiple fronts, it's going to be a hybrid. But when they're doing that nickel, the edge rushers in that are classified as defensive ends, not outside linebackers, right? And they're usually a little bit bigger. It's so you've got then the outside linebackers, but not always. So you've got the edge rushers, then you've got your defensive tackles, and you've got 3 linebackers who in theory are all off-ball linebackers unless they blitz one of them. Now, when they go to the nickel, it looks very similar to what we had in the 3-4. It becomes, except that your defensive ends are there, and you're, one, and then your 2 tackles. I'm sorry.
Take out the nose.
Right. So in the nickel, the defense is going to look very similar, at least in the personnel. It's just, it's when they're in those base sets, which is actually a majority of the time they're in the nickel, I think, these days. But the difference is, what they do with those edge rushers, hand in the dirt versus linebackers. So in that, like in this defense, I think Maje is going to be the closest thing to, at least with who they have now, is maybe the closest thing to Hassan Reddick as that edge rusher, but he's a little bit smaller. Cam Thomas can play edge, and also when they're, and maybe a little bit interior sometimes. So yeah.
Here's where I would project if we were playing a game tomorrow with the current roster. In Gannon's 4-3, left defensive end would be A.J. Collier. Left defensive tackle, or the nose tackle, is Rashard Lawrence. Then you got Carlos Watkins at defensive tackle. And then you have the other defensive end would be Cameron Thomas, who's made to order for that role, by the way. Mm-hmm. I think he's great.
In kind of first running down situations, right?
So Collier, Lawrence, Watkins, Thomas. All right. Then the three linebackers would be Zaven in the middle. The Sam would be Isaiah, which we're talking about now. And the Will would be Kaiser White, which he thrived in and he's more of the coverage linebacker and sort of the weak side linebacker. What it really looks like is when they send the Sam linebacker rushing, what it really is reverting into is a 4-3. I mean,
a 3-4. Yeah.
Right. Or it's a 5-man front. So it's a 52, like a 52 monster. Okay. So because White would scoot over and they play 2 inside linebackers and then send that edge. Okay. So this is our question now. And then you have the regular secondary where you'd have Buddha and Jalen at safeties. And then you'd have Antonio Hamilton and Marco Wilson at corners. Okay. Or the kid Fenton, who was, I think, a nice pickup. So I think he'll play nickel, actually. So the question we have now is what we're trying to figure out. If Will Anderson comes in, he plays the Sam. There's no doubt in my mind, linebacker. It's Reddick's role.
And then moves into end in the nickel.
And then you move Isaiah to safety. So this is what I think is the dilemma that the Cardinals front office has right now, because it's where are we going to, count on Isaiah? And I don't think they're going to just play around with him. They're going to get definitive with him, because the way that JG has been talking. We're going to give every guy a role. We're going to tell them exactly what we want. He's going to do that with Isaiah, and I think that's the best thing that's happened to Isaiah since he's gotten here, is to have that definition going into camp, where he's going to play, what they expect of him, and how he's going to do it. So whether it's going to be that outside, strong side linebacker, or if they get a player like Will Anderson to fill that role, then they'll pull him off, into the secondary. Right?
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see, right, how they use that, because they're going to do with the various fronts they're going to use. Where do they put them? How do they use them? So,
well, one suggestion I had was to move Jalen Thompson to corner, where I think he's be really good, and then you'd have Buddha and Isaiah at safeties. If you notice, when they played Jalen Thompson in man on the perimeter, he was great. He was much like Byron Murphy. He played good leverage. He played good cushion. He broke on the ball. What Jalen is not good at is playing center field in coverage. He just doesn't have the instinct, and I'm not sure he's got the range it takes either. But we know Jalen Thompson's a baller, and we know he'll force the run. Put him at one of the boundary, the perimeter corner spots, and then interchange Buddha and Isaiah, and you got something I think really special there.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to do it, but that'd be interesting. Yeah, I want to get a couple more questions, then I want to get back to the draft. Lance is asking, our coaches don't have any head coaching experience. That scares me. What's your take, Joe? I don't want to go too far in depth because Lance, when we hired Jonathan Gann, or was it? No, it wasn't when we hired. It was when word came down that Sean that we didn't get Sean Payton. I did a live stream and I talked about this at length, so I definitely recommend. It was one of the group therapy sessions. The short answer is I went through a whole list of first-time head coaches with no head coaching experience who've been successful. It had almost every year there's at least one or two, sometimes as many as three first-time head coaches who have never been head coach before, who end up being successful. Brian Dable did that. You have other coach like
VA.
every I'm sorry.
VA.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin was never a head coach before he was coach. Sean McVay. There's that. Listen, to me, what they need is NFL coaching experience. It doesn't need to be head coaching experience. Ideally, coordinator experience, which they have. So I've had a lot of long conversations about this, and if you want to hear more about that, go check out that live stream. It's from a couple months, it's a little bit before they hired Gannon. And if you want a link to that, message me, and I'll get you a direct link to it. But no, I'm not worried at all about that fact. Now, is Gannon going to be a good coach? That is a question to me that's independent of head coaching experience, and we'll have to see, right? But that to me doesn't bother me even a little bit. They're every year almost, and I went through a list of them in that live stream. I show you this coach, then this coach, then this coach, almost every year. Stefanski, right? The guy, the Sirianni, right? Just went to the Super Bowl, first time coach. So there's a long history of demonstrating in the league that not having head coaching experience is not a problem. The problem is when you get a guy sadly, Cliff Kingsbury had head coaching experience, but he had no pro coaching experience, right? So, yeah, to me, that's the concern. So, but I want to go back to the draft, and what I want to talk about at this point is I want to look at a couple things. I want to look at day 2 and day 3, and what I want to talk about is some players a little bit deeper in the draft there that you think, and I think the Cardinals either will or should consider. We talked a lot about the first rounders and a little bit about the second rounders. So who are some players? Let's start with day 2, players that we think are going to go somewhere in the second or third round, who we think, the Cardinals we think they're looking at, and maybe some players we think they should if they aren't. So we'll do back and forth. Maybe let you list a player, then I'll list, and we'll go back and forth a little bit. So who's the first player you'd mention somewhere in day 2 or 3 that you think they're looking at, should look at, and is a guy that they might take?
Clark Phillips III, Utah, slot corner. Love him.
Okay.
Probably goes somewhere on day 2, second or probably third round. I think with their early third round pick, they could take Clark Phillips. Mm-hmm. Great feet. I mean, if you saw the Patriots, Marcus Jones.
Yeah.
We wanted him on the Cardinals. Joe and I both mocked him last year, and we're sad to see the Patriots gobble him up. I mean, he's got Marcus Jones ability. He's got those kind of feet, and he's a playmaker. So if we could grab him for the slot, I think that would be great. How about you?
So yeah, that's an interesting player. He's a guy who's definitely he's a slot only corner, right? He's small, and he doesn't have a great athletic profile for his size. He's not a plus athlete, but he's still good. And he's going to be a shifty kind of savvy, kind of gritty corner in the slot. So that's a nice one. I'm going to stick with corner as well and talk about a guy that they have had a meeting with, Julius Brents out of Kansas State.
Oh yeah.
He's long, tall. He's not the fastest, but he's got good enough speed. He's one of, he's, I think in the 4.5s, I think, but that for a guy his size and length, that's good. And like, there's a lot of other cornerbacks we've talked about. You talked about Emmanuel Forbes. We talked about the first rounders and a few other guys. This is a guy who, like, do not be surprised if they end up taking him at 34. I'm not saying that's who I think they will necessarily, but I think he could absolutely be in play at 34 for them. If they don't go corner in the first round, they need to get a corner. I could see that being a guy they look at.
Yeah, he is a stud. I mean, everything about him, he's a physical dynamo. He's got, like, what is he, 6'2", Joe?
Something like that, yeah.
I mean, he's thick. He's a baller. Yeah, I could see them. That's a great pick.
A couple of comments. Brent's can't cover tight ends. I don't think they'll ask him to do that, though. They're going to play him on the outside.
Right.
He's raw. Listen, some of them
he's
are
a
right.
Zone corner. He's a zone corner. Yep.
So, he's 6'3", 198 with really big wingspan. So, sometimes it's a little bit of a developmental kind of projection with some of these players, but he graded reasonably well. So listen, don't be shocked if they look at him.
Yeah. I think we will see a day 2 cornerback.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're going to draft one in the first round. It would surprise me. But even though a lot of people love Gonzalez and Witherspoon,
mm-hmm.
I think we're going edge. And seeing as well, I don't want to change the subject. Maybe we come back to the elephant in the room in the first round and Jalen Carter. So let's table that. Let's stick with. But before we leave, I want to get your thoughts on that.
Okay.
But
who's the next one for you?
The kid Gibbs, the running back from Alabama.
Jahmyr
Gibbs. Oh my goodness, can that kid scoot? And we need a speed back. We need the lightning to James Conner's thunder. He'd be a nifty fit. I've seen him mocked at 34 on a number of occasions in the last week. And I have to be honest, it excites me to see him there, even though we want to draft 3 players at once, right? I mean, we want a cornerback, we want an offensive lineman. But that kid, wow, he's electric. And I think of Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
When you see a guy like that, and I don't think the Cardinals are going to go for Bijan Robinson.
Yeah.
Although he's like top 5 on every pundit's draft boards. I mean, he's not only a special player. Everything I've heard about him and I've seen him talk is that he is just an incredible leader in the locker room and of a program. So, that's a tantalizing prospect. But who else you got in the second round?
Well, I'm going to stay on the offensive side, and Simon G is saying day 2, 3 outside wide receiver. So I'm going to deliver here. I think a guy that's people are saying is going to go higher than a lot of rankings have him. A guy who I think, this is my kind of sneaky, this guy I could see going at pick 34, because I don't know if he's going to be there later than that, is Jonathan Mingo, Ole Miss wide receiver. The production isn't as good as people would like. I know the arguments. He couldn't outproduce. He didn't put up the kind of numbers you would expect with his physical traits. He also, I believe, had an injury a couple years ago and was kind of recovering from that. But just the projectable traits and the tools, he to me is like kind of like to me the comp is like Deebo Samuel. Not necessarily saying that same level, but he's big. Like he's stocky. I shouldn't say stocky, but he's like 6'2", 220 or something like that. He's thick, right? But he's also got pretty good speed. And he's a guy that I think, and if they're looking at this offense and saying, we're going to do stuff that's like the Shanahan offense, I could see wanting to have a guy like him. And that really physical guy, and and seeing what they could do with him. So a lot of people there are people saying that he's a guy who going to go probably could go second round, maybe even late first. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but they met with him, right? And listen, let's say Charlie Jones or or A.T. Perry, I think is what you meant over. I love A.T. Perry. I think Charlie Jones, I would not go Charlie Jones over Mingo. I think Charlie Jones is a little bit smaller. He's more a guy who I wouldn't mind in like the fourth round. A.T. Perry, I love, so I don't hate that, but I think Mingo, I think the traits there, I think he could be really, really good. So that's my sneaky one that I could see in the second round with them.
Yeah, I see your Mingo and raise you Jalen Hyatt. Tennessee. If he's hanging around at 34, boy, what a season he came off of. And that Bama game, he was unstoppable.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just unbelievable. The other thing is they've had Quentin Johnson in TCU, and you're not going to take him early in the draft. I cannot fathom that.
I've seen mocks where he sliced around too.
Exactly.
If he's there at 34, I wouldn't be shocked if they took him.
Because he could be BPA, best player on their board at that point, and I think they're looking ahead at that. Or if, like you said, if they get the 2 Lions picks, maybe that makes sense with the second pick, or and like you said too, is they kind of have set themselves up for having options in the lower part of round 1, and maybe Johnson's one of those. I mean, I just did, ESPN has their own mock draft simulator now.
I saw that. I tried one. Yeah,
I did too. And who is there for me at 34 as a BC guy? Zay Flowers.
Oh man,
they had him ranked 21st, but there he was at 34.
I'd run to the podium for him at 34, even though he is small. God. I don't care.
I've seen every one of his games, and he is the most electric wide receiver I've ever seen in a Boston College uniform. He is. I saw times this year where, and our quarterbacking wasn't very good too. So what he did was pretty special, where he would outmaneuver 4 guys in the secondary, like Pac-Man, like deking and moving sideways and then sprinting between 2 of them and then cutting back through the third. I mean, he makes people miss like you wouldn't believe. And plus he's got, that 4.3 speed. He is dynamic. And I think there's a chance he'll be the first wide receiver off the board. So I'd be shocked to see him at 34, but he was there. So I had to take him, Joe. I had,
nice. Why don't we shift to day 3? We've got some day 2. So who are some prospects on day 3 that you like, that or that are likely to be day 3 picks that you like and you think that maybe they might be looking at, or you hope they are, or what have you?
Well, Tyjae Spears, the running back from Tulane, if he's still at 105 in the 4th round, I would hop all over him. Do you see what he did against USC?
I didn't see it, but I know he's had some really good tape.
Oh, he's just he is he's got the whole package, and he reminds me some of Najee Harris, particularly in the open field, the way Harris just would make people miss. I mean, and having that burst, how Harris could just, stop on a dime and then boom, be gone. I mean, this kid Spears is like that. And so he comes to mind. How about you?
So I'll go with a running back. I've talked about him before in my live streams. He might be late day 2, but he could slide to day 4. Or maybe he's more, or I'm sorry, day 3. I should say he's more been thought of as a day 3 player, but he might make his way up to day 2. And that's running back Israel Abanaconda out of Pitt. And I talked about him on one of my recent live streams, Brett Coleman talked about him. The deal with him, he's fast, he's young, he's a little raw, but Brett, in one of his videos where he talked about him, discussed how he's a really good fit for that outside zone, wide zone, where where you need that guy with the quick step and cut and be gone.
Right.
And he talked about him as a guy that, I think anyone who's a good fit in a Shanahan offense is probably a good fit in this offense based on the schemes. So he talked about him as a fit for that. So I think we need a speed running back. We need that desperately in this offense. So for me, yeah, he's a little raw, but he is an interesting guy on potentially day 3 that could fit that role.
Yeah, good call there. He actually showed up on my ESPN draft in the 6th round. I popped on him like white on rice.
Real quick, Tommy Huxley is a 49ers fan who likes to come in here and have some fun. Bacon of the Niners confirmed. You don't have any picks to trade for him, my friend. What do you guys have? Your first pick's like 100 or something like that. You need picks to make that trade, but hey, so
good one, man. Good one.
Yeah.
Dreaming free, right?
Yeah. So okay, so who do you have?
Ivan Pace. Jr., Cincinnati. Well, actually, they didn't play together because Pace transferred in this year. But watching him at the Senior Bowl, and oh my God, I mean, he strikes me as a Gannon-esque player. He's downhill all the way to the ball. Now, I think he projects to the outside in the NFL. Like that Sam outside linebacker position. I think he could possibly play that, or certainly can play the weak. But man, the guy has pass rushing, unbelievable quickness as a passer. I think he had, what do you have, Joe? 8 or 9 sacks,
something like that.
Cincinnati this year.
Yeah.
I mean, and his moves, his jab step moves have guys breaking their ankles. So I just really thought he stood out as a really good prospect, a day 3 type prospect. I don't think he'll make day 2, although someone might see the special in him and take him to 3rd.
If he were 2 or 3 inches taller, he'd be on day 2, right? For sure. That's this thing, the length and the height, right? And the wingspan too, right? So people worry about him in coverage as a linebacker, but he does the tackling, as EJ Steiner, Brett Coleman say, he does the linebackery things really well. And they compared, and others have compared him to Malcolm Rodriguez, the guy that the Lions took in the 6th round last year and was kind of played nice for them as a rookie. So yeah, I think that, I could see that as an interesting pick. I'll go with a guy that someone asked in the chat earlier. I didn't get to it. A guy that the Cardinals have met with who might be day 2, but could fall to day 3. And that's DeMarvion Overshown, sticking with the linebackers out of Texas.
Right.
He is a guy that they have had a meeting with. If you read his scouting report on Overshown, he's got all the tools. He had one really bad year, but improved this year to bring his draft stock back up. And he has everything you want physically as a linebacker. There's just some questions, in terms of, I guess he needs to be coached up a little bit. So that's the deal. But they met with him, and although they signed some linebackers and such, and they've got a couple linebackers, I could see them taking him if he's available early day 3. If he slides there, and looking at his, maybe a guy that they're gonna, they're looking towards the future on day 3. So,
right, good call. I was also thinking, yeah, that's an interesting player, Joe, and I think it's curious that they did meet with him. But I was thinking that in somewhere in this 2nd round, like Tucker Kraft
Oh, yeah, the tight end.
Yeah, South Dakota State.
Mm-hmm.
6'5", 255. And this guy is, I mean, you watch his tape and you just like come away going like, oh my God. I mean, he is, a dynamic receiver and looks the part. I think he might even sneak into the third round after the workouts he's had for people, but
Yeah.
that's a guy that it'd be interesting to see if they address the tight end position in the draft because because Zach Ertz is going to be out till midseason or maybe even more. And we're going to need some other guy in there. And they haven't re-signed Steven Anderson or Max Williams.
Yeah. Well, Mel Kiper, I don't know if you saw it, and he posted an article where he listed kind of his favorite player at each position, not necessarily the best player in the draft, but players he likes or that he's higher on. And Kraft was his guy at tight end.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he really likes him. Well, let me real quick and use this. I want to use this as a chance to mention this, but we'll continue to talk about prospects. You mentioned tight end, and I think this is a list, the full list that I have, the running list of prospects that I have seen reports that they've met with or was able to identify, like I mentioned, like by seeing them on Flight Plan or something.
Right.
There's more players besides this they've met that haven't been reported, but I'm bringing this up because as a guy who you look at it in round, I think as a round 2 or 3 guy, Sam Laporta, tight end. That's the only tight end they've been confirmed to meet with. But I do think, I think tight end could be a sneaky position they look at for the reasons you're talking about. I think as Cardinals fans, we have not talked about tight end because we're all a little, as much as I do like, Trey McBride, and I think he's going to be really good. He came on at the end of the season, and I think he's going to be a good player moving forward. A lot of Cardinals fans were kind of off put by the fact that they took a tight end in the second round when there was other needs. And so, that's sort of been held against him a little bit. And I think in general, we're sort of snake bitten as fans about the tight end position. So the idea of taking a tight end anywhere before round 6 or 7 has been sort of an anathema to Cardinals fans. But I think it would not shock me if they get a tight end in the middle rounds, because as much like, okay, yeah, we got Zach Ertz, but he's recovering from a significant knee injury, right? Hopefully he'll be ready to play, but he's older and recovering from an injury. We've got Trey McBride, who, a lot of draft capital on him. I think he's going to be nice. But beyond that, they signed a guy who was like a fringe player from Philadelphia, right? I forget his name, but they signed a guy who doesn't really have any experience starting, really. Just he's a special teams depth guy. And they have, Sykovitz, right? Let's see, the guy that they signed, Noah Togliai.
Right.
Like they have Chris Pierce Jr., who's an undrafted free agent from last year.
Yeah, I liked him.
Yeah, but like
he's a wide receiver convert.
But you don't want to necessarily but you don't want to go into the season relying on him as your second or third, right?
No.
So I could see them like looking at tight end draft. And when you draft tight ends, you have to give them a year or two to be ready to really contribute. They're looking towards the future. I could absolutely see them saying, okay, we've got McBride. We like him. Ertz within a couple years is going to be retiring or moving on.
Right.
We need to have a tight end that's developing to be a pair because we like to do a lot of different sets. So,
you know why you're so right about this? Think about where Monty Ossenfort comes from.
Right. Dual tight ends in New England, right?
Correct. I mean, I'll tell you what. I was watching Dalton Kincaid the other day. Like, I can't get enough of film on him.
Mm-hmm.
I could make an argument that he's the best receiver in this draft. Like, he's a Kelsey. I mean, I think the best receiver in football now is Travis Kelce. Hands down of anyone. He dominates a game as a receiver better than anyone I've seen in years.
Yeah.
You can't stop the guy. I mean, he's got all the moves. I mean, he's not super fast, but he's uncanny, has uncanny instincts. He's got a quarterback who's in lockstep with him. I mean, Dalton Kincaid is a beast. I mean, he's the catch radius, the rack ability that he has. Man, I mean, for winning the between the seams and up the sidelines, I mean, whoa, that kid has a major talent, and I imagine he's going to go somewhere in the first round. I don't think I'm going to sneak him out of the first round.
Yeah, I mean, he might go early second, somewhere in the second, but I could see him in the first. You know, there's a couple other tight ends that people that feel a little more complete than him. I think he's.
Michael Mayer too.
Right. Yeah.
He's an elite tight end prospect. He's oh my God, someone's going to love him.
Right.
I mean, if he gets to Belichick, I don't see how Belichick could turn him down. Kincaid either. I mean, these are classic Patriots wide receivers who get open, and you can line them out. In Kincaid's case, you can line them out wide like the Patriots would do with Gronk.
Yeah,
because the Cardinals can do that with McBride too. I mean, he was good at it at Colorado State. Love what we have in him, but I think you're absolutely right. Monty Ossenfort is a tight ends guy, and we're going to see some action there. If it's not this year, maybe a high pick next year, and or a free.
Now, I will say I think in terms that he likes doing that. I will say it's also important to look at like what the offensive coaches are going to want to do, which I look to Cleveland right now because that's where Petzing came from. And they do have multiple tight ends they like to play there as well, right? They have.
Yes.
I'm looking at. They have Jordan Akins who had 406 snaps. Harrison Bryant had 563 snaps. David Njoku had 816 snaps.
Yep.
Then they have a 4 tight end who didn't play at all. So like those are the 3 on their roster right now.
Right.
And they all played, right? So I still think even looking at that, there's reason to think that they'll want to have multiple tight ends. Right now they do, but they're going to want to look towards the future of that. In terms of having, someone who can, step in whenever Ertz moves on, right? So, Brett Jones is all about that. He likes the tight ends a lot, and it's a deep part. It's one of the deeper parts of this class, right? So I think, I mean, I'm not sure that they go earlier than round 3, but like they've got 2 picks in the end of round 3. And if they do a trade back, they're going to get another 3rd round pick potentially. If Hopkins gets traded, we'll see. They may have some more picks. So I could absolutely see them doing a tight end like in the 3rd round with one of those multiple picks they might end up having.
Yeah. And one of the unicorns of this draft is Darnell Washington.
Yeah. He's interesting. Yeah. He's more. I mean, he's a guy who I think his receiving needs a lot of work, but he's like they talk about him. If you want a guy who can block for you and still receive, that he's probably that's probably more his profile as a guy who just is a difference maker as a blocker, but also can still receive.
Well, he's a good athlete too.
Yeah.
He's going to be an interesting prospect to watch in the NFL for sure. And Luke Musgrave is one of the better tight ends to come out of a draft recently. I mean, I think he ran a 4.5 at the combine, and he's shifty. He's got great size too. He's 6'6".
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know him because he plays on the left coast, but he's a player. He's probably like the Trey McBride of this year's draft is Musgrave. Okay.
Interesting.
But Cardinals have too many needs, I think, to not even think about the tight end until day 3.
I would generally agree. Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. What I want to talk about is I'll leave this up. This, like I said, the players they've met with, I think it's an interesting to see what they're thinking. When we look at the positions, let's going in the first round, going through the rounds or at least the days, like what positions do you think they're most likely to address at different points in the draft? So in the first round, right? So in the first round, what position? Obviously, it depends on, it could be a number of different places. Early first round is probably different than the late first round.
Right.
But considering that range, what positions do you think are on the table in the first round?
Pass rush.
Okay.
Either outside or inside. That's why I wanted to ask you about Jalen Carter.
Okay.
In your mind, is he off the board, or are you, if let's say you traded back to 7 and Jalen Carter's sitting there, would you take him?
So this is a good question. That's tough. For me, there's multiple things that have to happen for me to take Jalen Carter at all. I need to have had a really good meeting with him where I feel confident that he wasn't just telling me what he thought I wanted to hear.
Right.
But that he understood the gravity of the situation and the responsibility he has as a player. I'd want to have had multiple conversations with him where I feel confident about that. I will want to have had conversations with people who have interacted with him who are not his agent or his head coach, right? Yep. People who will tell you what he's like, and not, the head coaches are going to say great things because they want to promote their guys, right? Then obviously the agent. And I'd want to have a pretty strong feeling that the legal stuff isn't going to be an issue, which it doesn't seem like it is, but I don't know for sure. I'd want all that stuff. And plus I'd want to probably have had a workout with him where I saw that he did better than he did at his pro day because he just looked unprepared there. If I had all those things and it was a trade back where I got extra draft capital, then I would consider. I'm not sure if 7 is the spot. Maybe it might have to be a little further back, but I'm not taking him at 3 or 4. I have to there's a lot of risk with the off the field stuff baked in with him. So if I'm taking that risk, I want to have made a big trade that gets me a lot of extra draft capital with which I can hit on those picks more safely to offset that. So to me, that's kind of what has to happen to take him. And even I've got to feel good about all those things. And I've got to have had a trade back that gets me a lot of extra draft capital so that if he does flame out, I feel like I've got these other picks that are going to hit and I didn't completely waste that early pick.
Right. So let's, for our purposes here, take him off the board for now. Okay. All right. So if you're going to address pass rush, obviously it starts with Will Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether he'll be available or not at 3, we don't know. I mean, if you can trade down and guarantee you can still get him, I'd do that. I would also stay and take him. He's just too good. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's in everybody's top 4. Every pundit's top 4. Matt Miller has him rated number 1. He's DJ Daniel Jeremiah has him rated number 2.
Mm-hmm.
There are reasons for that, and he's been consistently excellent all 3 years at Alabama, right? So, but if it's not him, I mean, Nolan Smith, everybody knows he's a prize athlete. He's a number 1 kid in USA coming out of high school. And lived up to some of the billing at Georgia for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Got injured this past year, so there's a bit of that sets him back a little bit. Then you have Tyree Wilson. I mean, if Eric Burkhart wasn't his agent, I'd be all for it. I cannot stand the thought of in 3 years we having the same situation with Wilson scrubbing his socials and us getting another manifesto. And when we have a 5th-year option to use, Burkhart will do all of that, whatever it takes. I just don't want to deal with the guy anymore. As for the player, he's dang good. The thing that worries me, though, are two things. One is the foot that he just had repaired and had a metal plate put in, and they just took it out. Secondly is he's the funkiest tape I've ever seen. It's like he doesn't even get off the ball.
Mm.
He's like Rolo the Dancing Bear. He stands up at the snap, and then he puts a move on. It's almost like one-on-one in basketball. Then he puts a move on you, but he has an uncanny way of getting to the football.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it's a magnet, and he knows which side to pick. He's just amazing like that. Now, will he be able to be like that in the pros? I don't know, but he's a prototypical 4-3 D end. You plug him in and start him right from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think you'd put him on the right side, and then you move Cam Thomas over to the left. So you have him on the, him and Thomas's bookends. I mean, he'd be a great pick. I just can't stand the thought of Burkhardt. And then you have Elijah Cansey.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you're the only other really inside pass rusher, and he way outproduced Jalen Carter in college. I mean, the stats are not even close in terms of sacks, in terms of tackles for loss. The problem with Cansey is he's smallish.
Yeah.
Like he's an Aaron Donald type. Of course, came from Pittsburgh too. That doesn't bother me because the way he plays and how slippery he is, I think translates well to the next level. And I love the guy. I mean, I think here's the problem is once you get past Cansey, I mean, have you looked at the kid Dexter from Florida?
I don't
so we have the Florida ties. I watched his tape and just couldn't like it. I watched a bunch of tapes of guys.
Gervon Dexter. I have looked at him. He doesn't come off the line very quick at all, very slow.
No.
But he's a guy who's like, I mean, he's a late day two. He's like a third round, I think, guy they would look at there.
In a deeper class, he's day 3 for sure, because this is one of the weakest defensive tackles classes I have ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't fall in love with anyone except Keanu Benton.
Yeah.
Benton,
so
that's why
you're
I
talking
had him
about
34, because beyond him, Joe, there really aren't. I mean, and Mozzie Smith I like, but he's a 2-down player.
I think Mozzie Smith can be a 3-down player. I think he's got a little more juice than people think.
Oh, good.
But
if we take him, then I feel better about that.
I will say I don't think he'd be getting late first round talk if people didn't think they could play him more. But I don't know.
Yeah.
So you're talking. So we're talking first round. You think obviously Anderson, if there's a trade back and he's gone, you think Wilson is interesting. You love Smith, which I do too, right?
Right.
And you like Cansey a lot.
Right.
So, but you're thinking first round is
defense,
pass rush one way or other. Okay.
Yeah, because there are good corners that are going to be there later in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Like Bentz,
Brent,
the one you said, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. There are guys in the second round and third round that you can tab, and you have 3 picks on day 2. See, that's how you got to look at the draft sometimes.
Right.
I know that Witherspoon and Gonzalez would be tempting, but they're, I don't think they're top 10 picks because they just haven't proved it enough yet, for my liking anyway. They weren't very good until this year. Now, what they did put on tape this year is pretty special, so I get it. But as a top 10 pick, can you really be safe?
I do buy them as top 10 picks, even if maybe if they've worked up to the production. And I wouldn't mind if we took them somewhere, like I wouldn't want to go as high as 7, but if we trade back to 11 and one of them's there, I wouldn't hate that. But I do tend to agree that as much as I like them, the cornerbacks might be the deepest position other than tight end in this draft. And I agree with you that if you take cornerback early and then in the second round, the defensive tackles you're looking for might be gone, right?
Right.
Then that's like or if Benton is still there, you got to grab him
Right.
because it really falls off there. But in third round, you can find some cornerbacks that are going to be nice, right? And definitely second round, find someone.
Right.
Steve, he's saying Cam Smith in the second round would be really nice, right? There's guys like that.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So for me, as much as I love Witherspoon, I think to me, I've described him as a better version of Byron Murphy Jr. He's that inside outside gritty, but even better. And Gonzalez, man, when you watch him at the combine, was so fluid and smooth. Just
Yes,
he is.
Yes, he is.
He is going to be with I think he's already really good. I think he's going to be a star too.
Yeah.
Right. And Agent 47 Witherspoon is potential to be top 5 corner league. I love those guys, but I am also with you that I would probably rather trade back, get some extra draft capital, and take an edge rusher or interior pass rusher in the first round and get one of those corners in round 2 or 3 that is may not be quite their level, but could still be a really good starter.
Yeah.
A
guy I didn't even mention that I love is Lucas Van Ness.
I was about to mention him. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the kid Herbig too from Wisconsin.
Yeah. Someone in the chat mentioned that earlier, why no one is talking about him, right? As a potential. I didn't get to that comment because we've been talking about so many interesting things, but someone asked, why isn't anyone talking about him? What are your thoughts on him?
Love him. He's got good get off, good strength. He's got a balanced game, attacks the run well. It's a classic. I like Leo Chanel coming out last year. I was pissed that we didn't get him.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chiefs did. Did the Chiefs ace the freaking draft or what?
They did really well.
We need a draft like that. So having missed out on Leo Chanel, I'd love to see Herbig in Cardinal red. He's got game, and he'll just keep getting stronger and better. He's filled in pretty nicely. He'll keep going. He's probably, you're gonna have to take him in round 3, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and Raphael will ask why we're not talking about him as a day 2 pick. Yeah.
So, but Van Ness has a little JJ in him.
I know some people are down on Van Ness because he only has one trick right now, but he's got room to develop, but he's really good at that. He's at that trick. And once he gets a curveball or change up something, he's and like the comp for him that I thought was interesting was Justin Smith. Like that, I think that's PFF's comp from a guy who played for 49ers.
Yeah.
Who was really good, got kind of tough defensive lineman. So, he's 6'5", 272, ran a 4.58.
Right.
That's crazy. Like,
yep.
He's he
can rush from the inside, Joe.
Yeah.
He's very adept at swim moves and he's a power kid. So, I'd love him if they took him. I think we just got to add strength and pass rush ability up front in some pick in the first round, because you're not going to get a lot of it later. And the real top guys, it's top heavy. There's some real plums there in the front end.
So let me use this as a way to transition to kind of day 2 picks, what we think they're going to do, because I got to tell you, as much as I talk about there's good cornerbacks later, there are some edge rushers I really like in that early round 2 area.
Yeah.
Felix Anaduki Ozoma, and BJ Ojolari.
Right.
And you mentioned Tuli Tuipulotu.
Yes.
Those guys are all potentially guys, and even Nick Herbig, although maybe you go more round 3 with him. But those three guys all have a chance of being there at 34. One of them, I would bet one of them ends up going late round one and surprises us. But then you had Will McDonald, who a lot of people think's a first rounder, but could slide. Like of those names, right? You've got Tuipulotu, Ojulari, Anaduke Uzoma, and Will McDonald. I think of those four, two of them will be on the board for the Cardinals. And at 34, if you don't go edge rusher right in the first round, let's say you trade back and you go with an interior defensive lineman, or they go in a different direction. I really like taking one of those pass rushers early round 2.
I agree, and you picked him out perfect. I love the kid from Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
He's scheme versatile. He can play outside and inside, and he is a stick of dynamite. He stands out to me. So great call there. I mean, if we wanted to address a different position, or even go with Paris Johnson, who, by the way, would be an amazing pick. I mean, we're overlooking the tackles. I mean, Paris Johnson, Lindy's comp to him is Tunsil. And I can see it. I can see it. He's wow. He is an all-pro waiting to happen. And you rarely get a shot at a guy like that. So, if they wanted to go offensive line first and come back, like you said, with defensive line, then you're pushing cornerback into the third round. But maybe we get multiple picks like we've been talking about. And maybe, there are a few guys like Clark Phillips we talked about could probably be there at 66.
Yeah.
Hopefully would be there. Catrell Clark is another guy that he might be day 3, but there are other defensive backs in there that are pretty good. Cody Trice. So, but anyway, I like your thought there. I think that you said it well. There's four or five guys right there who bring a lot to the table. I like BJ Ojulari.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, we didn't mention Will McDonald. Will McDonald is a baller. He could play that Reddick role, Will McDonald. I wouldn't doubt it in a second. He's a good one. So,
got a couple of people arguing that, hey, and posing the argument, I should say, that with how good those edges are around there, maybe we should go cornerback in that first round. So maybe I'll tell you, I think I'm more and more like on thinking if they can trade back a little further than people think and add a second round pick plus future firsts,
right?
Let's say you get into the teens or even late teens, and then let's say you take an offensive lineman there, though I wouldn't really want to go that route, but maybe you take someone like Elijah Cansey or someone, maybe one of the edge rushers that's a little bit later there, or another cornerback. There's a couple of cornerbacks, like we've talked about the top 2, but what if Joey Porter Jr., right? What if you go with someone like him or Deontay Banks if they're there in the teens, and then in the top of the second round you go Keanu Benton if he's there, or Mazzie Smith if he's there,
right.
And then maybe let's say in that trade you got another second round pick, and lo and behold, that second round pick that was part of that trade, maybe in the middle of the second round, you find that one of those pass rushers we talked about, Ojulari or someone, is still there to allude to.
Herbig.
Or Herbig, right? And so you do that, and then at the top of the third round, maybe you look at a center, and then we've got multiple, or maybe you get a cornerback at the top of the third round and get someone like Olatimi in the late third round, right? So maybe you go trade back, get a cornerback in the first, in the middle, like Joey Porter Jr., edge rusher and defensive tackle in the second, right? And in the third, maybe another cornerback, maybe receiver. I don't know. Yeah. So a lot of different directions, right, that they could go there. I'll tell you, we've gone on 2 hours, and boy, I feel like we could go forever. But I probably don't want to go too much longer. So why don't we wrap this up with this? When it's all said and done, okay, they have 8 picks right now, right? I believe with all the extra with the comp picks.
Yeah.
And let's say with trades they end up with 9 picks. They end up getting do a pick swap as part of whatever. They might have more picks, but let's say they end up with 9 picks. What positions do you think those 9 picks are? In no particular, when we walk away, what positions do you think they've addressed? And some of those, there might be double dipping a few picks position wise, but what positions do you think we're getting?
Pass rushers, 1 inside, 1 outside. Hopefully 2 corners, a slot, and a perimeter. There's half the picks right there.
Okay.
But those are the 2 huge needs on defense. So you're going to spend half the draft on that. And then on the offensive side, we need a center, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's top priority would be center for what the roster is right now, wouldn't you say? Or left guard.
I think that's the most important position. Actually, I think defensive interior is the most important position, but center is close second. Right.
So I think we're going to look at probably 2 offensive linemen. And then if we have 3 more picks, we're going to need a running back, maybe a tight end or wide receiver. And I was hoping we'd draft a quarterback because, who's good. Find our version of Brock Purdy.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard. The more picks they get, the better, obviously. When we look at it from that standpoint, makes you want them to trade down and get more picks because there's so much we could use. Plus a punter. Right?
Yeah. I don't know if I don't know if they'll draft a punter. Maybe they will. I think depends. It wouldn't shock me, but I think maybe they, a lot of times you get undrafted rookie free agents, for that, or, so.
Yeah.
Simon Shee says defensive tackle, edge, center, cornerback, right tackle, wide receiver, safety, tight end, punter. So he's on board with you on the punter. Yeah. So I'm going to while Walter had to step away for a minute there, I'm going to go over I'm going to go to the chat and get a couple comments. We've got, let's see, Daniel Corrett, thank you for being here. Ty Wilson is a beast. He has all the physical attributes, but he put up very poor numbers at Texas Tech. If the Cardinals take him, they're in trouble. I wouldn't say that. I think people are projecting based on his traits. I don't think any one pick puts you in trouble. I actually like him more than a lot of people, I think, in this chat too. But I don't want to take him at 3. I want them to trade back if they're going to take him. His length and what you can do with that, coaching that up, is really interesting. Brett Jones says Carl Brooks equals Darnell Dockett. Man, if he plays like him, that would be awesome. That guy was such a stud. Brett Jones saying, like Garrett Williams, 4th round, if there, that's, that cornerback, if he makes it to the 4th round, I think that'd be an awesome pick. So it's going to a couple comments.
The injury. Yeah.
So while you'd step away, I was looking at some comments. Okay. So, let me go. So here's what I think, and it's probably a little bit similar. I think they get a cornerback, like a bigger outside cornerback, right? I think they get a guy who is a safety / slot, like Jamie Robinson, is a guy who can play both.
Right.
Okay. So I think they get a safety / slot cornerback.
Yes.
I think they get an edge. Okay.
Right.
Definitely think they get a running back, center. I think they get a wide receiver somewhere, whether it's day 2 or day 3. I think they get an offensive tackle somewhere. It might be early, it might be late.
Right.
And then I think they get at least one defensive line, interior lineman, and maybe two. Maybe they go with someone like Keanu Benton and like maybe Moro Ojomo, maybe on a little bit later, someone like that, who's a really good run defender. So that's what I think they come away with when this is all said and done. So let's see, Stevie Escobedo saying Pickens is a late round steal. Same cornerback Garrett Hodgins, like Israel at running back, Mitchell as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna wrap this up soon. Walter, is there anything else? I've got a question I'm gonna ask you before we get out of here, but is there anything else that you want to mention or talk about that we haven't got to?
Well, my biggest dilemma is at 3 if CJ Stroud is sitting there, because, man, I just think he is so good. And I think the value of quarterbacks is always, more than any other player. If you have 2 good quarterbacks, your trade value skyrockets. I mean, I'm not quitting on Kyler, but we also have the scenario where in 4 years, Kyler hasn't finished a season strong yet. I think, and also, if you have someone that dynamic, I don't know. I know so I'm not giving up on Kyler, but I'm also thinking that the value of what you could get at that position, it's shocking to me that the Texans would overlook Stroud. But we're not behind the scenes and we don't know how the interviews go. But, the way he played in that Alabama game, he was stunning. He was ripping it. And he was beating him with his legs. So that's just it's been nagging at me and it feels good to say it. But that's how high I value Stroud. Is I think he's
is your dilemma whether we should take him?
Yes.
That for me, it's an easy answer of no. I'm pretty adamant that you do not draft a quarterback before day 3 unless you're going for a starter. Unless you don't have a starter now or your starter's near retirement. My only dilemma is who do I trade pick 3 to and how much can I get for them because Stroud's still on the board.
Right. Well, hopefully it's a good haul for the Cardinals. Yeah. And that would mean pretty much that Will Anderson's off the board, and that would solve at least that part of it for the Cardinals, is that they're not even going to be able to take him. And we could rejoice that the Seahawks wouldn't have him available either. So, but no. Yeah, that's my draft dilemma in my mind. That's my conflict is that, I don't think there's any position that's more important than quarterback. But here's my thought to that too, Joe, is that, what I keep reminding myself is we have all these other needs and we got to build this line back up. And I'm also fantasizing about a Dave Sears, like drafting Paris Johnson in the first round, drafting Mike Schmitz at 34, and then one of the best guards in the 3rd round somewhere. If he had his way, I bet he'd do something like that. And I'll say this again, the Lions weren't any good until Sears rebuilt that offensive line homegrown. Mm-hmm. And that would appeal to me too, even though we have these other needs, is if we can address the offensive line and really invest in that the way and develop those players, what a boon that could be, right?
Right. All right. I want to ask a question, one more question, then we'll kind of wrap up here. I want you to find 2 or 3 players that are just players you really like, doesn't matter what round, that for whatever reason you would love to see the Cardinals draft. You hope that they come away with these 2 or 3 players. Could be a day 3 person, day 2, doesn't really matter, but just for whatever reason, you just like these players.
Well, I can't convince anybody of this, but Brian Branch, of this, all the tape I've studied, I just wrote one superlative after one superlative after one superlative. I just think he's the second best defensive player in this draft behind Anderson. And you're getting tremendous value, but because they put safety, they described him as, I would put ATH, athlete, because that's what he is. And diverse athlete. He can play multiple positions. He can play any position in the secondary. Nick Saban said that. He said, we put him in that dog role because few people can do it. But we could have put him at corner. We could have put him at free safety. I mean, he's good. And I love the kid Battle, too. The other kid on the other end. Oh, my God, is he great. So him on the defensive side. On the offensive side, well, I love Zay Flowers, but we can't draft a wide receiver in the first round. But a realistic offensive player that I think we could be able to take. I love the kid Gibbs from I want us to draft Alabama and Georgia kids.
They have some pretty good programs there.
You know, I mean, we'll draft a kid from Wayne State before we draft a kid from Alabama. I don't get it. Now, this might be the carryover from Belichick, because now that we have Monty, and you know how Belichick and Saban are like joined at the hip. Here's my wish. Let's go big time Power 5 juggernaut schools and take the best players out of those. And, what I'm fascinated with too in this draft is the kind of teammates you could amass. Like I was doing a whole Georgia draft. I was like, holy cow, there's enough for a draft here. How about those Illinois kids?
Yeah.
How about that Illinois secondary? Oh my God.
Yeah.
That Illinois secondary, the 3 of them are dynamic. I mean, how about the Wisconsin kids up front, with Herbig and Benton, and you've got tandem of teammates. That fascinates me too, is that you've got guys that know each other and could be take the next step together in a pro team. And so what about you?
So I've got 3 names that are just players that I just like, whether it be for some reasons we've talked about, whether it be like because of something they bring, because they've graded really well, I think they're underrated, or what have you. One we already talked about, Chandler Zavala, right? Just would love to end up with him like late 3rd round, early 4th. If we could pull that off, I would just be ecstatic. Kobe Turner, defensive lineman. He's a little bit smaller, but I think he would be really nice player in the interior, some depth there. He's a guy who was before thought of as kind of a day 3 player, but is kind of climbing. Some people might think he goes late day 2. We'll see. And another player I mentioned, Carter Warren, an offensive tackle who had an injury last year that he missed the season. So you don't like that, but he's a guy who you could probably get on day 3 and I think could become a starting caliber tackle. He's in terms of, he's a guy with a lot of potential. So, he's a guy you could bring in who could potentially become that right tackle, next year. So he's a value there that I like at tackle.
Well, Joe, you've really gotten the East Coast drilled into you, man. I mean, 3 kids from the ACC.
There you go.
Impressive. You've done your regional scouting.
I'll tell you, mock draft Monday, weekly mock draft Monday has helped me become familiar with a lot of these. Listen, I do mock draft Monday as much for me as everyone else, because it's how I learn the draft class.
Isn't it great? Yeah,
it's so much fun.
Job.
Thank you. So, well, Walter, man, we've gone That's Grandad. Oh wow, 2 hours already. I gotta go. Gotta slowly go get ready for work. So we're gonna wrap this up, Walter? Why don't you tell folks where they can find you, find your work, what they can, where they can check out your podcast, anything else you want to mention and promote.
RevengeOfTheBirds.com. I'm deputy editor, daily writer, and we got a great thing going there. We had a great group of members and great robust discussions going every day. It's and kudos to AZ Sports Underground with what Joe and Kyler Bird and Marcos, my man. Oh my God, I love that guy.
I love seeing him, what he's just developed in terms of his writing, his film study. I love seeing him blossom in that way. So, Marcus, if you're watching, I appreciate you.
Yeah, Labrada. I mean, he's plus. Does the dude do his homework or what? Oh my God, he's got his nose in the film all the time. So, and then at WBJ Mitch on Twitter, been enjoying my conversations with Cardinal fans there, and so we're really excited about the draft and the uniforms Thursday night. Good thing we kept everybody up late tonight because we're going to be up late Thursday night.
Right.
Much anticipated. And the news from Hollywood Brown is they're good, man. They're good. So you're gonna like them.
Nice.
Yeah, we have some good things to look forward to amidst the ongoing dramas.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate everyone hanging out here. Brett says, thanks, Walter. Great stuff. Thanks to another great stream. Appreciate everyone who's hung out with us, all your questions and comments. Sorry I couldn't get to everything, but we enjoy having you guys hang out with us. Walter, it's been awesome to get just on. We went everywhere.
We did.
Cardinals and and a few other places. So, but this is what we do, right? We hit all the notes, right? But I love talking Cardinals with you, Walter. I appreciate all the work you do. All of your links are going to be in the description of the video. So folks that are watching it, make sure you check out Walter's work and his Red Rain podcast. So we're going to get out of here. I'm going to put up the shout outs for my channel members as a thank you to them who support the channel. And make sure you follow Walter, and we'll see you all next week. Peace.
On the Cardinal Rule.
Woo!
Woo! Cardinal Rule.